So we're taking a closer look at how memes are being weaponized to spread misinformation online, especially when it comes to the election, Capitol riot, COVID vaccine, and other major global events. To discuss this growing trend is Axios media reporter Sarah Fisher. Man, Sarah, I'm so happy that you are doing something on this, because that's where I get into my biggest fights on social media have to do with memes. It's like, it really is. It's the equivalent of reading the headline and not bothering with the article, and that people love doing that, but they're so easily fact-checked. And I see all sorts of garbage in meme form that if people would just take 30 seconds, they would see that it's not true. And it's not just about, politics. I think what really sort of gets under my skin, I see a lot of memes, and it just depends on sort of your circle of friends. I've seen a lot of memes that really sort of sow even deeper divisions in this country when it comes to race. Memes that exaggerate history or misrepresent history to keep us, sort of going at each other. It's a tragic history in this country. There's no need to exaggerate it. And so it just drives me crazy, because I know where it's coming from, and it's coming from, not a good place. So listen, what is it about memes that lend themselves to be these perfect little bite-sized vehicles of misinformation? And how serious is the problem? Because meme is a really cutesy word, and you might be tempted to think it's not that big of a deal.
It's such a good point, Anne-Marie. It's actually a huge problem. And the reason is they're really hard to moderate. So we have a lot of machines and computers that can moderate when something is false in text, or when a bad type of picture with nudity or graphic violence is uploaded to a platform. But our machines cannot understand context when you overlay those two things on top of each other. So let me give you a good example. If you were to post the word poison on your Facebook, a machine might not necessarily say that's a bad thing. If you were to post a picture of a vaccine, like a needle, I don't know that a computer would necessarily say that's a bad thing either. But if you put the word poison on top of a picture of a needle, obviously you and I know that changes the meaning. However, computers can't pick up on that context the same way that a 5-year-old or any other person could. So that's why it's a big problem. Now, to address your point about the harm that they cause, when I talked to researchers about it, they said one of the biggest problems with memes is that they're meant to be funny. Oftentimes, they're interlaced with satire so that they can go viral. And so the purpose of memes isn't always to educate, but honestly to entertain. And so that's really hard to police from a First Amendment perspective. You don't want to take that down. It might offend people who are saying, hey, I'm just trying to tell a joke. But the problem is, to your point, Anne-Marie, a lot of these memes have an underlying message which is sinister, even if it appears to just be humorous on the outset.
So, Sarah, the malicious memes aren't only dealing with politics and elections, as Anne-Marie says. They've played a role in mistrust and anger and misinformation around race, but specifically in the time that we're living in right now, over health matters and the coronavirus pandemic. What have you learned?
Yeah, so one meme can target an entire conspiracy around misinformation with this vaccine. We talked to a researcher that said one meme that was tweeted in December that tried to link the vaccine to 5G went so viral that mentions of 5G vaccine started to pick up and trend online. That was just from one meme that was completely doctored and fake. And so the problem I think that memes create is, one, they're so easy to go viral because we can't moderate them. Two, because of free speech issues, again, especially around humor, it's really hard to take them down once we do find that they're spreading. And three, this is probably the biggest problem, they're really easy to continuously doctor. So let's say you take a meme and it gets policed. Someone does decide to take it down. All you have to do is change the background color, maybe change a few of the images or words, and suddenly the machine does not yet pick up that that's the same bad problem meme that it already had tried to tackle and take down. And so, as you mentioned, Vlad, it's not just a problem of vaccine misinformation. It's all healthcare misinformation. It's details around COVID. It's race. Heck, I would even attribute this latest Wall Street populist revolution with the GameStop stock to meme warfare. And so it's a problem that our society is really going to have to navigate on all sorts of fronts.
So then, what are these tech companies doing? They've made a lot of noise about cracking down on misinformation, even, booting the president off of Twitter and off of Facebook. They must be sort of putting their heads together to figure out how to tackle this. You've explained how, challenging it is, but what are they doing?
Well, one thing that they're starting to realize is it's not a problem we're going to fix with machines only. We need human brains to help machines understand the context of memes. The problem is there's only so many human brains out there that are working on these problems at tech companies. It's not like they're going to hire additions of tens of thousands of people to tackle this. So what they're starting to do is actually just crowdsource this to everyday people. Hey, help us. If you see something that looks funny, submit a complaint about it. So Twitter just launched something called Birdwatch, which is a crowdsourced misinformation tackling program. Facebook launched the Hateful Memes Challenge, which asks people to submit hateful memes when you see them. So the answer is leverage more humans, not necessarily at their companies, but all over the world, people that are on their platform, see if they can review more stuff.
What role are foreign powers like Russia, China, and Iran playing in creating and spreading these misinformation memes, not only in the US, but around the world? I think if people realized and people understood that so much of what we are sharing, so much of the information that is being sent at high-speed velocity throughout the internet comes from foreign actors who just sort of sit back and watch as this country or others, tears each other apart.
It's such a good and important point, Vlad. One of the problems with memes is we are really struggling to understand their origin. A few years ago, everyone said deep fakes, which is doctored media, when people speed up or slow down a video to make it look like someone did or said something they didn't do. People thought that deep fakes were going to be a huge problem. But in reality, we have a lot of technology tools that can help us find where the original video came from. And so when you can find where the original came from, it's a lot easier to see who might have incentive to doctor it. The problem with memes is that because they're actually so simple, literally anyone with a phone or computer can easily make one of these things. It's so hard to track their origin. And if you can't track the origin, it's very hard to understand the intent in putting it out. Now, this is why foreign powers like Russia, Iran, powers that are adversaries to the U.S. love to use memes to spread misinformation and disinformation. It's very hard to track back to them. So even if something goes viral that they created, researchers and the public have very little ways of tracking the fact that it came from our foreign adversaries. So the bottom line here, Vlad, is it's very easy for them to feed misinformation that divides us without actually getting blamed or caught. And that's why our foreign adversaries love memes.
So is there a role for Congress and regulation here?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Congress is debating so many different things, mostly right now around transparency with these platforms. They want to know, okay, how much did you find? How much did you remove? And can we hold you account to removing it and finding more and more as we know that these memes spread and continue to grow? What I would argue is our country needs more funding, more resources to tackle these programs and these problems as a society. One of the challenges is even if Facebook or Twitter develops a crowdsourcing mechanism that works well for their platform, we know that they'll share that intel, but we need this to be a huge, large-scale meme tackling program or misinformation tackling program. It can't just be one or two platforms handling this on their own. And then the other thing that I would say Congress is thinking about is how do we introduce more digital literacy programs to educate people in the U.S. so that they know when something like a bad meme comes across their computer that it's actually disinformation, that it's not something that they should be taking very seriously. So those are sort of the two big things that Congress is tackling right now. And I think that they're both very achievable. Finding more ways to build transparency, finding more ways to educate consumers. These are not hard things. It just is going to require bipartisan consensus to move on them. And, who knows when we can ever get bipartisan consensus, Vlad and Anne-Marie.
It's an excellent point. And I mean, one of the things that I find to be remarkable, in addition to the fact that most people don't realize where these memes are originating from, as we pointed out, that many of them come from nefarious actors, geopolitical actors, is the fact that a lot of them are insidious, even ones that don't particularly have an element of race attached to them, or politics, or vaccine, or medical information, but even something that makes you laugh. You know, oftentimes we laugh at things not necessarily because they're funny, but because they reinforce a stereotype. And those are, to me, the most insidious memes out there, that, you know, somebody sees something and you go, ha, 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 and then you think to yourself, wait, why am I laughing at that? Very few people actually often pause and self-reflect. In fact, I would argue that the big problem in this country and many others is that people don't self-reflect a lot. But what should users scrolling through their social media be on alert for? How can they tell, other than their innate sense of right and wrong, whether a meme has a malicious intent?
I would assume most memes have malicious intent. If you go in there with that blanket assumption, then you're able to educate yourself and stay more on guard. When I talk to disinformation researchers, they say most of the memes they find have negative intent or have a negative skew. And so just going in there with that blanket assumption helps you stay on top of it. Of course, we know that's not all true. I mean, the Bernie Sanders, inauguration meme with him in the mittens, that wasn't bad intent. That was a funny meme, but that's considered to be the outlier, not the norm. So consumers should assume that. The other thing I would really warn people about is misattributed quotes. This is one of the biggest problems in memes. You have a picture and then you have a quote, and it looks like it's an authoritative quote from an authoritative figure, but it's actually not. And so one way you could very easily fact check a ton of these memes is just Google the quote. See if that quote actually comes from the person that the meme implies it does, because it's overlaid onto a picture of them or because it says it does. A lot of the times it's not actually the right expert that's saying that quote, or it's not something that they said at all.
You know, real quick, Sarah, before, you raised an excellent point. You mentioned the Bernie Sanders mittens at the inauguration. There are some memes, Sarah and Anne-Marie, that are funny in the moment, right? When people saw Senator Sanders there and that image flashed around the world as the inauguration was happening, right? Let's recall, people started tweeting about it during the inauguration. Now it's funny. The fly that landed on Vice President Mike Pence's hair during the debate, in the moment, during the debate, people started tweeting about it. That's kind of funny. But what I think happens ultimately is if you see that meme turn up in your Facebook feed or your Twitter feed a week later, and now that fly is holding a sign that has a political statement on it, now you know somebody somewhere is manipulating what was kind of a humorous, sort of, oh, America's collectively laughing at this one thing, into a tool that is being used now to poison the discourse. I'm more, I get nervous when I see a meme turn back up again. I mean, you saw the Senator Sanders thing turn back up again when Ted Cruz went to Puerto Rico. And I don't spend my time like looking at this stuff, but I remember thinking to myself, okay, now somebody somewhere is trying to manipulate how you think, how you perceive what Senator Cruz did, right or wrong. And that's, I think, the dangerous, when these things become dangerous.
Yeah, and I think there's something
right.
to be said for sort of doing like a bit of a gut check. It's not scientific, but if you look at a meme and it doesn't make you feel good, it doesn't make you go ha ha, you got to wonder about it. And sometimes it's very subtle. Sometimes it's just, I bet you no one's gonna forward this meme because no one supports XYZ anymore, do they? It's just sort of like, you're like, why would you write something like that? It's a little bit of a gut check. Even something as simple as that, it's not authentic. It's not about sparking conversation or encouraging unity. It's about sowing division. So Sarah, I think the best advice that you gave was just assume that this is inauthentic and not coming from a good place, and work from that position before you press that share button or send it, via email to somebody else or whatever.
Absolutely. And just to sort of summarize both of your points, one thing that people need to keep in mind is that memes are A/B tested, meaning that people who create them and who expand on them are constantly using you as a test case to figure out what's going to go viral. So they'll take that Mike Pence fly on the wall, fly in his head meme, they'll add a flag here and a different color there, and they'll see what goes most viral if they share it with a few friends. And if one picture gets so many likes and shares and another meme picture does not, they're going to double down on the thing that they know worked and figure out ways to continue to optimize it until it can go completely viral. Now, some cases, they'll do that A/B testing in sort of these darker, smaller platforms or in messaging platforms where researchers cannot sort of pick up on the fact that they're doing it. And once they figure out what works on the smaller, more obscure platforms, maybe a Reddit or Telegram, they'll then take that message and import it onto Facebook or Twitter, where it has opportunity to go very viral because they know it already works. So to expand on that, when you see something on Facebook or Twitter, assume that it already made its way to you because somebody tested it and figured out that it was most likely to be on those platforms.
Sarah Fisher, always great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good to see you.